Coming up, this week marks the 50th anniversary of the Wounded Knee occupation by the American Indian movement. Writer and director Tazbah Chavez tells us about her latest work coming soon to a TV near you. And a surfing professor makes it his life's work to care for the coral reefs. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Amadawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. We start in South Dakota, where 3 tribal nations have come together to make history. That's with the construction of the largest urban Indian healthcare center in the nation. ICT's Stewart Huntington was there for the grand opening last week.
In 2019, tribal leaders on the Cheyenne River, Rosebud, and Pine Ridge reservations took over the Indian Health Service hospital called Susan that served the urban native population in Rapid City, South Dakota. IHS has a checkered service history across Indian country and at Susan.
This is powerful moment for Oyate as well as the urban Indians in the Rapid City area and surrounding area, as well as coming from the reservations here in South Dakota, because it gives an opportunity to take true ownership of our healthcare in all capacity. It's no longer the government telling them how to do it and when to do it. They're taking that responsibility on for themselves.
Using the so-called 638 contract process, where tribes can assume control over certain federal programs, the tribal leaders thought they could do better. Last Saturday, the tribes opened the Oyate Health Center, a state-of-the-art $120 million facility that replaces the IHS buildings that dated to 1938. Perhaps better still, the opening is part of a trend in Indian country.
Today we're seeing a lot more of our tribes take ownership of their healthcare and running 638, and so we're seeing that across the United States, and it's never been a better moment for Indian people to take ownership in our healthcare as well as our education, and we become true sovereign nations when we're able to fund and govern ourselves. Yeah.
In Rapid City, South Dakota, Stewart Huntington, ICT News.
A key bill protecting Native children in Montana's state legislature is gaining traction to potentially become a law. The legislation, introduced by Native lawmaker Jonathan Windyboy, is called the Montana Indian Child Welfare Act. It would localize the national ICWA law that says there is an order in which Native children should be safely placed in the case of custody proceedings. It says Native children must first be placed with family members, then with a family of the same tribe, and finally with a Native family before being placed in a non-Native home. If passed into law, Montana's ICWA bill would enshrine these protections and would also prioritize tribal representation at custody proceedings, among other things. The law passed the state's House earlier this week with a 66-33 vote. Up next, it will move to the state Senate and then potentially to the governor's desk to be signed into law. Native youth are fresh off of the heels of a major gathering. The United National Indian Tribal Youth Organization, also known as UNITY, hosted its mid-year conference in Tempe, Arizona last week. The 3-day youth-led event is designed to empower Indigenous youth and adults. Notable speakers and trainers at the sold-out event included actress Amber Midthunder, who starred in the 2022 action film Prairie. Jane Myers, a Comanche and Blackfeet Emmy Award-winning filmmaker, was also in attendance. This year's peer trainer was Adriana Mitchell, who was Miss Indian Arizona from 2019 to 2020 and Miss Colorado River Indian Tribes from 2018 to 2019. Unity is the oldest and largest Native American youth network organization in the country, with 325 youth councils in 36 states. Staying in Arizona, Native artists are gearing up for the Heard Museum's 65th annual Guild Indian Fair and Market. The premier market is hosted near downtown Phoenix, Arizona, and is among the largest Native American markets in the world. With more than 600 participating Native vendors and artists, the event draws nearly 15,000 visitors. Aside from the market itself, the Heard Museum also gives Best of Show awards. All ticket sale proceeds go to the Heard Museum's mission of advancing Native American art. The market is on Saturday, March 4th and Sunday, March 5th. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Drums and protest songs echoed across the South Dakota prairie on Monday as hundreds of people marched to Wounded Knee. That was to honor the activist who revived the Indigenous fight against injustice 50 years ago by occupying the sacred site. ICT's Shirley, Sneve, and Stewart Huntington were there.
The song of the American Indian movement mingled with eruptions of celebratory gunfire at the very place where hundreds of Lakota people were slaughtered by U.S. soldiers in 1890, and where AIM activists, including the late Carter Camp, took a stand in 1973.
Today we're still here. Today we're strong because of our relatives who fought here in 73. Today we're proud to be who we are as Native people, Indigenous people of this land. I want to say we'll be like...
Bill Means, brother of the late AIM leader Russell Means, who helped lead the occupation, reminded the crowd not to forget the 19th century massacre.
There's almost 300 men, women, and children in that grave behind us. Every time we go by here, we're reminded about the United States government, what they did to our people. And so that's the reason why we resist.
Then Means switched to talk about 1973 and the present.
Remember, we came here for the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. We didn't just come here to raise hell. We had to make a statement to tell the world that Indians are still alive. This is still our land, and the Black Hills are not for sale.
The 1973 occupation began as a protest against the heavy-handed tribal government of Dick Wilson, but evolved into a 71-day standoff against federal law enforcement and demands for treaty rights. In the end, at least 3 people were killed. Veterans of the occupation gathered to swap stories.
I felt like the spirit, the energy brought us here, me, for sure. And I was looking for something, to validate ourselves, our own self-searching. And in a time when it wasn't good to be Indian, in my time, or my youth. And so for better or worse, I realized that you have to be who you are, and you should be who you are.
The federal marshals had all the high grounds, and we had bunkers and support teams down here in the middle, and trading post was over here in our security headquarters. And so it's all gone now. You know what strikes me about it is as soon as it ended, the federal people came in and they bulldozed all the main structures and buildings here. And I think they were trying to erase this out of history, that it would go away and people would forget about the massacre that happened originally and the rebellion that happened here again, because people haven't forgotten. And so coming back here, I think, is a way of rebuilding that struggle and the structures and the fight that took place here to keep the memory alive and to care for future generations. And so this is a real strong statement, I think, today, everybody being here for the 50th anniversary, the ones of us that are still around.
Ken Tiger served in Vietnam before joining the 73 occupation.
Looking back on it, there was a lot of similarities. There was a lot of farmers in Vietnam who didn't want anything to do with the war. They just wanted to take care of their property, their families, their communities. And basically, that's what the people here were trying to do too. But there's fractions within the government who were trying to take what they had, what little they had to begin with. They were trying to take it away from them, and they were trying to tell them how to live, what to do, and things like that. And that's not the way it should be.
He brought a picture of himself from '73 on his phone and pointed to the spot where, back then, he dug community toilets. Willard Carlson remembers the era as a tough time for natives.
There was a lot of things that was happening in Indian country everywhere, like heavy-handed police, white bartender killed a friend of mine, highway patrols took an Indian man and executed him on Highway 101, Arcata, California.
And he remembers getting ready on the West Coast to join the occupation.
And I went off recruiting warriors and weapons, and my mother, she had about 8 rifles she gave me from her family, or her man at that time, just as long as they were operational. So we drove over here, and it was a very dangerous time, very bad.
Looking ahead, things are perhaps better, but the work is not done.
It is still sad that we unfortunately face some of the same struggles today, and so that's what keeps many of us as helpers and continuing to show up and help where we can for future generations, and of course honoring those that have gone before us.
The fight is not over. The fight continues to this day, and I think it'll continue for the rest of our lives. Generation through generation. I mean, we're still here today. 50 years later, we're still here today. A lot of our people, we continue to do our daily battles with the government, with the everyday life, the struggles, the different things that basically the system is basically set up for us to fail as Indigenous people. And we continue to fight that to this day and prove them wrong. And we'll continue to prove them wrong, every day.
In Wounded Knee, South Dakota, with Shirley Sneve, Stewart, Huntington, ICT News.
From hit shows like Reservation Dogs and Rutherford Falls, Tazbah Chavez is a force in television today. Her latest endeavor is writing and directing an episode for crime drama Accused on Fox. It premiered on Tuesday. There are twists and turns throughout the episode, following a group of friends and the drama that follows their attempts to shut down a uranium mine. ICT's Paris Wise sat down with the creative for a behind-the-scenes look at the project.
So you wrote and directed an episode of Accused on Fox, which premieres tonight. Very exciting. Tell us about the show and the episode.
So Accused is, it opens on a courtroom defendant, and it's an anthology series, so every single episode is different. And so the viewers will know nothing about the crime, but you'll see some folks are the defendant or defendants in our case on trial. And so it's told through the defendant's point of view through a series of flashbacks, and you sort of find out why they ended up in trial to begin with. And the episode that I co-wrote and directed is about a group of Navajo friends who are arrested for protesting a local uranium mine. And they come up with a plan to try and shut it down in goodwill. And then we see what happens from there. Somehow they ended up in a courtroom, though.
And how did the opportunity to be a part of this present itself to you?
I used to be the co-chair of the Native American and Indigenous Writers Committee for the Writers Guild of America West. And maybe like a year and a half ago, we participated in sort of like speed dating with different showrunners. So each committee member or each Native writer in the committee, they put down a list of like the 4 top showrunners they would love to have a meet and greet with. And so Howard Gordon, who's the showrunner of Accused, was on my list. And so you had an hour with 4 different showrunners, 15 minutes each to just say hey and introduce yourself. So him and I met during that time. I was actually in my trailer shooting Reservation Dogs, and I had this meet and greet with Howard. went great. He was wonderful. And then about a year later, he came back and said that he had this show, and there was an episode that they wanted to do on environmental justice issues with Indigenous people. And he wondered if I was interested in hearing about it. And so I heard about it, and I was like, please let me do this. My mom is an environmental journalist growing up. My dad is a former tribal chairman. I grew up sitting at dinner tables where environmental activism and issues were discussed all the time. I spent a lot of my spring breaks at protests. Back then it was in Nevada for nuclear waste test sites at Yucca Mountain. And so when they came to me with this, I was like, yes, I would love to do this. Please choose me. And so that's sort of how this came to be.
Speaking of working with other great people, Robert I. Mesa, Kiowa Gordon, Natalie Benally, Forrest Goodluck, they're actors in the show. How was it working with them?
They're incredible. I had the best cast. Each of them are so talented and bring such a different dynamic to the episode. They work really well together. All of them were such a joy to work with because it's like they're so open to trying things, and they also have great relationships outside of the set. So I think that really helped. Some of them had known each other for years. And then each of them I sort of had some touch point with, like Robert I had met years ago and we had some friends in common. Kiowa had been on Reservation Dogs. Natalie actually met as a dancer first years ago when I was doing poetry and she was dancing. And then Forrest, I've been an admirer of his work. And so, it was sort of the dream team of cast that I was able to pull together. And it was the dream to be able to cast as many Navajo actors in these lead roles as possible. And we did a pretty good job, including with Deanna Ellison. She plays our attorney as well.
This episode covers a very real issue in Indian country. Does that make your job as the writer, director easier or more difficult? And can you walk us through why?
I was very conscious that the scenes that we're recreating are things that a lot of our actors, our background actors, have probably experienced in real life. And so we took a lot of care on set to make sure, like, for example, our medic, I had her, she carried on her sweetgrass, sage, tobacco. When the background extras showed up, who were all First Nations folks, who I am so thankful that they showed up, because people were like, we can't find that many Indigenous background. I was like, yes, we can. It's called Instagram. It's called Facebook. So, for example, when that bus pulled up with all of them, I went onto the bus and I just, with the medic, and let them know that I understand that we are portraying a protest scene. I understand that we're portraying tear gas. And if at any point that becomes triggering or hard, or you need to take care of yourself, our medic has sweetgrass, she has sage, she has tobacco, whatever you're needing for however your people pray, or you need to take care of yourself, please let us know if you need to step away. And so we did that with all of these hard scenes so that people also knew that they were taken care of spiritually and as human beings. And I think in that way, I hope that it was an easier time for people to shoot versus putting people through more trauma and not being considerate or even acknowledging that that might be something that's hard for them. So to answer your question, I think it's both. It's like, it's difficult to get right. And then I think you can make it easier on people if you go about it in a good way.
You've written and directed for other major TV shows that have been Indigenous led. What was it like to bring your voice and this story into this space where there's many different voices of different backgrounds?
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, I have to give a lot of respect and gratitude to Howard Gordon, because when he went on this journey to have this anthology series and to have different communities of different backgrounds and issues, he really, I think, walks the talk in terms of handing over the pen and handing over the set and the camera to the people who understand these communities best. And, for myself, that meant that, being able to co-write it, being able to direct it, being able to cast who we wanted, like him and Fox and the entire crew really went to great lengths to be able to bring this world to life. And so I think, when you look at the anthology series and you see all of the different communities it's going to represent, I love that we have an episode. I love that we have a very powerful, very nuanced episode, and that we were part of the conversation of injustice and the justice system in America, because I think so often we're sort of like left out of a lot of that. And so it's been very, very cool. I'm super, super proud of the work that we did.
Well, your episode of Accused will be out tonight on Fox. Accused airs every Tuesday, and episodes are available to stream on Hulu the next day. Writer and director Tazbah Chavez, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Paris. I appreciate it.
Up next, let's meet an Arizona State University assistant professor. Cliff Capono is a chemist at ASU's School of Social Transformation and School of Life Sciences, and he's also a professional surfer. ICT's Mackenzie Allen Charmley has this interview.
It all started for me kind of separating my two passions in life, surfing and science, and it wasn't until the later part of my graduate studies that I was able to unite the two and move into a career that is filled with both trying to surf the best waves in the world and find out new ways to protect them.
Bringing up coral reefs, what exactly are you learning about them?
So some of the main projects that I look to investigate are trying to find out how coral reefs can be seen as resilient organisms. And in the Hawaiian culture, the coral reef are our ancestors. So it's something that we're trying to really explore and see what are some of the biological and physiological factors that provide these resiliencies to our ancestor reefs. And we're hoping that if we learn more about the resiliency of our ancestors, maybe it'll give us a better indication of how we can be resilient as a people in the Hawaiian community.
How does being a native Hawaiian impact your worldview of the ocean and living things in the water?
Yeah, I mean, being a Hawaiian person, it's my whole identity is the ocean. As with many native people, the place which they are a part of, the place that raises them, it's just a part of their life. And, you know, separating the two is like very detrimental to the overall well-being. So for me, having the ocean and being Hawaiian Kanaka Maoli, it just makes me feel like I'm living a full life to protect myself and my home.
Did your family in any way influence your decision to go into sciences?
Yeah, my parents were really supportive of us trying to learn different forms of expressing how we see the world. So whether it's in our Hawaiian language, or whether it's in like Latin or whatever, my family has been, and my community has been really supportive of education and science. So yeah, I think I've had a really supportive upbringing, and it's I'm really privileged in that sense to be given that support.
Could you tell us about the partnerships that you have within your research?
Yeah, so within the research, I specifically work in a lab called the Mega Lab, and we study ocean conservation and ocean science. And within that Mega Lab consortium, it's people who are part of Arizona State University, which is myself, but also people at the University of Hawaii. So we try to create a team of investigators that can pull from different students and resources here in Hawaii, where I do my research. And I'm primarily based out of the Center for Global Discovery and Conservation Science out of ASU. But the Mega Lab is this extension place where we can bring in people from all different institutions and places to think about how we can better protect the ocean.
Let's turn to surfing. What does it mean to you to be a professional surfer?
It's like a job, kind of. You have to provide certain expectations from a sponsor, and they send you to surf places. I don't know. Professional surfing is pretty cloudy. I compete in a few competitions a year, and mostly just try to surf good waves and provide the surf industry with media. So it's not too glorious. It's kind of selfish, really. It's not like science.
When we talk about the science, industry of science and Native representation, do you feel that being involved in this industry is kind of like a superpower?
Yeah, like if you mean like being an Indigenous person making me more competitive in scientific literacy, for sure. I think all Indigenous peoples have so much wealth of knowledge and data stored within the songs and the dances and the arts. So it's just, we're already coming from a large repository of valuable information that can help improve the current state of society and the planet. So yeah, I think it is kind of like a superpower. But in really, like, I would hope that people acknowledge that they have these stories within their own families, within their own clothing, within their own songs. And if they can really appreciate that, we're going to be extremely competitive, and there'll be so many opportunities that we're going to have to start figuring out how to disseminate in an appropriate way the information to people outside our community.
Well, Professor Kapono, thank you so much for joining us.
Mahalo nui. Thank you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.